All praises to the Most High, Yahweh Bashem Yahweh Shai, Bahashem Raha Kodash. Double honors to the elder apostles and elder bishops of Great Millstone who rule well. Peace and salutations to the hopeful elect, scattered throughout the four corners of the earth, laboring in his truth in all sincerity. Jeremiah 51:13 in the NLT. You are a city by a great river, a great center of commerce, but your end has come. The thread of your life is cut. And this is an article here from Reuters that came out roughly about 2 hours ago. This was published today, January 17th, 2026 at 12:31 p.m. Trump vows tariffs on 8 European nations over Greenland. President Donald Trump, also known as Nero, on Saturday vowed to implement a wave of increasing tariffs on European allies until the United States is allowed to buy Greenland, escalating a row over the future of Denmark's vast Arctic island. In a post on Truth Social, Trump said additional 10% import tariffs would take effect on February 1st on goods from Denmark, Norway, Sweden, France, Germany, the Netherlands, Finland, and Britain, all already subject to tariffs imposed by Nero. Those tariffs would increase to 25% on June 1st and would continue until a deal was reached for the U.S. to purchase Greenland, Trump wrote. The president has also repeatedly said Greenland is vital to U.S. security because of its strategic location and large mineral deposits, and has not ruled out using force to take it. European nations this week sent military personnel to the island at Denmark's request. These countries who are playing this very dangerous game have put a level of risk in play that is not tenable or sustainable, Trump wrote. The United States of America is immediately open to negotiation with Denmark and or any of these countries that have put so much at risk, despite all that we have done for them, including maximum protection over so many decades, he said. Protesters in Denmark and Greenland demonstrated on Saturday against Trump's demands and called for it to be left to determine its own future. Prominent European Union countries have backed Denmark, warning that the U.S. military seizure of a territory in NATO could collapse the military alliance that Washington leads. Britain has also given its support. So this great city of commerce that we read about in the opening scripture, Jeremiah 51:13 in the NLT, which is America, also known as Babylon, has vowed to now put tariffs on 8 European nations regarding the fate of Greenland. And this is a classic U.S. tactic, basically trying to cripple other nations with economic bullying and forcing other countries to bend their knees to America's will. You know, they do this with economic sanctions, basically trade and financial restrictions, sometimes including embargoes, freezing these nations' assets, certain types of bans on exports and transactions. And they used agencies like OFAC, which is the Office of Foreign Affairs Control, which is a branch of the U.S. Treasury Department. They basically help control and influence the economic affairs regarding these other nations. And we know that many years ago, Mayor Amschel Rothschild, he was credited as saying, "Give me control of a nation's money, and I care not who makes its laws." And we know that Mayor Amschel Rothschild is basically the founder of the Rothschilds banking dynasty, which pretty much now has complete control of this capitalist nation known as Babylon. But as the scripture once again says, Jeremiah 51:13, you are a city by a great river, a great city, a great center of commerce, but your end has come. The thread of your life is cut. So this is all about to come to an end, but going back to these economic sanctions and tariffs, some of these other types of sanctions include, travel bans, We just saw earlier this week where Nero added 75 countries to the list of countries that are now indefinitely suspended from immigrant visa processing. And I was looking at that and came across this article here. I'll read just a little bit of it. I believe this was a short article. This is from aljazeera.com. This was published January 14th of this year. Trump administration to suspend immigrant visa processing for 75 countries. U.S. State Department says freeze will affect citizens of Somalia, Haiti, Iran, and Eritrea, among other countries. The U.S. says it will suspend immigrant visa processing for 75 countries around the world as U.S. President Donald Trump's administration continues its wide-reaching crackdown on immigration. The Department of State said on Wednesday that visa processing would be paused for countries whose migrants take welfare from American people at unacceptable rates. The freeze will remain active until the U.S. can ensure that new immigrants will not extract wealth from the American people. It said, adding that the measure would affect dozens of countries, including Somalia, Haiti, Iran, and Eritrea. Nero has pursued a hardline anti-immigration agenda since he returned to office last year, January, promising to carry out the largest deportation operation in U.S. history. Over the past year, he has announced curbs to several U.S. visa programs and drastically slashed the number of planned refugee admissions into the U.S. His administration has also deployed heavily armed immigration officers to major U.S. cities to detain and deport people accused of being in the country illegally. And I'll stop there. We get the point on this particular article. And this just goes to show you how biblical prophecy is playing out. It's unfolding right as we speak. And, that's pertaining to 2nd Esdras chapter 15, verse 17. A man shall desire to go into a city and shall not be able. And that's including not just people traveling to and fro within the country itself, but now with this, you put an additional 75 countries onto this list with an indefinite timetable as to when this is going to be lifted. So you have people who were probably pursuing, school, getting education visas, work visas, Trump has basically put a halt to that, at least for the time being, but this is indefinite. So there's no telling how long that's going to go on. And, there's also these tariffs of, which we read about in the opening article, in which Nero has vowed to hit 8 European nations with over Greenland. So we know a lot of these European nations have sent troops to Greenland, and that's what we read in the opening article. And, prominent European Union countries have backed Denmark, warning that the U.S. military seizure of a territory in NATO could collapse the military alliance that Washington leads. Britain has also given its support. So, these countries now, they're sending in troops. And obviously Trump doesn't like that. He's basically stated, like I read earlier in this particular article, he's basically throwing it up in their faces. We've protected you guys for all these decades. Now I want Greenland and you can't let us have that. That's basically, what it is. He's always going to throw it up in your face, what he's done for you, what he's done for these other countries, and how they should be willing to just bend the knee. We know that the U.S. strategically wants Greenland because, one, they feel that it's too close to Russia and China. It's better if the U.S. has it, and this all goes along with the, their manifest destiny doctrine, their manifest there, where it basically says that it's, the white man's, it's in the so-called white man's, it's fate, this is destined to be that they control the entire Western hemisphere, from Greenland all the way down through South America. But, let's take a look at another video here. And this is a very short video, roughly about 15 seconds if I'm correct. And this is Trump going into it again as to why he wants Greenland.
If we don't take Greenland, Russia or China will take Greenland. And I am not going to let that happen.
Is there any deal they can offer you? Either like
Yeah, sure. I'd love to make a deal with them. It's easier. But one way or the other, we're going to have Greenland. If we don't take Greenland.
So you heard it there. Trump is basically saying he would like to make a deal, but one way or the other, the U.S. is going to take control of Greenland. So that is a indirect threat, basically, that the U.S. is willing to send in troops in order to ensure that they end up possessing Greenland. And all this is for, one, he's basically stating to keep this out of the hands of Russia and China, but as well, they want those resources there. Remember, the U.S. and China are basically this is the U.S. and China racing to see who's going to lead the world in terms of artificial intelligence. So Greenland has a lot of resources there, in which you see some other of the elite bigwigs, Bill Gates, I believe. I can't remember the guy's name who controls Facebook. These guys are all in favor of the U.S. taking over Greenland because, they all have artificial intelligence plans of their own. They need the U.S. to do this, and Trump is going to Trump works for the elites. And so if they want the U.S. to take control of Greenland, this is what Trump is going to try to play out. But as we know that these other European nations, they're not liking this. These are supposed to be, we're basically seeing it here. The beast is coming to hate the whore, and we can go right into that in Revelation chapter 17. Let's start at verse 16. And I'll read this in the KJV. Revelation 17, verses 16 through 18. And the 10 horns which thou sawest upon the beast, these shall hate the whore, and shall make her desolate and naked, and shall eat her flesh, and burn her with fire. For Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahushai hath put in their hearts to fulfill his will, and to agree, and give their kingdom unto the beast, until the words of Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahushai be fulfilled. And the women which thou sawest is that great city which reigneth over the kings of the earth. And this is going back to what that initial article was basically stating. They're not happy. They're not happy at all that, one, Trump is now adding an additional 10% in import tariffs, and that goes into effect on February 1st. And then on June 1st, it's going to increase to 25%. So these countries now, they're not happy with the U.S.'s tactics, Nero's strong arming them. They're not happy with this. And this is why they are now sending troops into Greenland to try to offset Nero's plans here. So, but we know that's, Nero's going to do what he's going to do anyway. And that's going to ultimately lead to Revelation 17 and 16 playing out. They will strip her naked, eat her flesh, and burn her remains with fire. These countries are going to launch. That's in addition to Russia, China, North Korea, and Iran, the countries who we know historically have opposed the U.S. They may have done business with the U.S. in the past, but they're trying to break away from that now. This is why they're trying to start their own BRICS nations and stuff. These countries are pretty much done with the U.S.'s tactics of economic bullying. But now you have the U.S.'s allies themselves. They're coming to hate the whore. They're waking up now to, realizing that this is going to always be. You're going to always be subject to. It doesn't matter who's president. Whatever president sits in there, it just happens to be Nero this time, and hopefully he is the last sitting president, before we go into the kingdom. But right now, Nero's the one that's really helping this thing. He's moving this thing along expeditiously here. These things are really ramping up with him in office. And as we can see here, these shall hate the whore, and shall make her desolate and naked, and shall eat her flesh, and burn her with fire. The U.S. doesn't think this kingdom can come to an end. They believe that, we're approaching our 250th birthday, so to speak, as a nation. And they're feeling like, hey, this can go on and on and on forever. But it's not going to work that way. It's kind of like Marlo said in that HBO series The Wire. You want it to be one way, but it's the other way. So whatever the U.S. has in plan, they don't understand here. Revelation 17:17, for Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahweh Shai hath put in their hearts to fulfill his will. Going back to what I just said, the U.S. wants it to be one way, but it's the other way. They don't, Nero doesn't understand that, Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahweh Shai has put in these other nations' hearts to fulfill his will and to agree and give their kingdom unto the beast until the words of Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahweh Shai be fulfilled. And we understand, going back up one verse, those words are, shall make her desolate and naked, and shall eat her flesh and burn her with fire. And that's what we're about to see here very soon. We're looking like we are a matter of months away from this. And by saying months, it doesn't necessarily mean 3 months away or 4 months away. We are a matter of months. Months can just mean 48 months. It can mean 36 months. It can mean, we're no longer decades away from this happening. We're no longer centuries away from this happening. We are counting down the months right now. We still have the MOTB prophecy to go. But once that takes place, these last remaining prophecies here, the destruction and the deliverance, of course, we have the MOTB, which is going to basically coincide. We're pretty much at the beginning stages of Jacob's trouble now. Jacob's trouble is underway now. It's hitting the northern tribes first. Judah and the southern tribes, Judah has pretty much yet to get involved in this. Judah is pretty much sitting this out. Judah, you're not going to catch Judah out there protesting on behalf of any Somalis. They're just not going to do it. That's not how Judah is going to be roused up here, as we understand from, Genesis 49. Judah is not going to get involved with these Somalis. They're not protesting and risking their lives on some people that are, these Somalis are like Hamites and Ishmaelites, pretty much. So Judah is not getting involved in that. But we'll eventually see, when Jacob's trouble gets fully underway, when the southern kingdom starts getting attacked the way the northern kingdom is, we pretty much have the MOTB and then the destruction and deliverance. So these last remaining major prophecies are going to pretty much all coincide with each other, which is why I was saying that we're only just, we're a matter of months away from this thing happening. So let's go into Isaiah chapter 47. I'll start with verse 1 and then I'll scroll down to verses 10 and 11. Isaiah 47, prediction of Babylon's fall, and that's how the subheading title is read there. Prediction of Babylon's fall in the NLT. Verse 1, come down, virgin daughter of Babylon, and sit in the dust, for your days of sitting on a throne have ended. O daughter of Babylonia, never again will you be the lovely princess, tender and delicate. I'll read that one more time. Come down, virgin daughter of Babylon, and sit in the dust, for your days of sitting on a throne have ended. O daughter of Babylonia, never again will you be the lovely princess, tender and delicate. Let's scroll down to verse 10. You felt secure in your wickedness. No one sees me, you said, but your wisdom and knowledge have led you astray. And you said, I am the only one, and there is no other. So disaster will overtake you, and you won't be able to charm it away. Calamity will fall upon you, and you won't be able to buy your way out. A catastrophe will strike you suddenly, one for which you are not prepared. And we see, just like it says right here, calamity will fall upon you and you won't be able to buy your way out. And just like we saw in that video, that short 15-second video I just played, and that's classic Nero talk. Hey, let's make a deal. Let's negotiate. Let's go to the business. Let's go to the boardroom table and let's talk it out. He's always looking to buy something. He's always looking to make a deal. But like Isaiah 47 and 11 says, calamity will fall upon you and you won't be able to buy your way out. It also says a catastrophe will strike and you suddenly, a catastrophe will strike you suddenly, one for which you are not prepared. So you're looking at Russia, China, North Korea, Iran, and now you look at the supposed, or these so-called allies, European allies that the U.S. has, Great Britain, France, Germany, so on and so forth. They're not going to waste time and attempt to even fight Babylon with conventional warfare. That's not going to happen. The third woe is going to be fought through unconventional means, meaning these nations are just going to launch. They're going to launch thermonuclear fire via ICBMs on this country. And Babylon is not expecting that, especially from its so-called European allies. And that's why it says here, a catastrophe will strike you suddenly, one for which you were not prepared. We go back to Revelation 17 and 16, and that's precisely what that's talking about. These nations, they will strip her naked, eat her flesh, and burn her remains with fire. So it's not going to just be Russia, China, North Korea, Iran, the nations that we know already have been hating America and been looking forward to this day. It's also going to be America's so-called allies that's going to launch these ICBM nukes on them and burn this place with thermonuclear fire. Let's go to Jeremiah chapter 50. And I'll read verse 9. For I am raising up an army of great nations. From the north they will join forces to attack Babylon, and she will be captured. The enemy's arrows will go straight to the mark. They will not miss. And that's basically what I was just stating here regarding the third woe. America is under this belief that they have whether it's their army, Marines, Navy, Air Force, they have the conventional weapons to beat any country on this planet. And that's probably true. I don't deny for 1 second that, a country that puts tens of billions into its war machine annually, every year, this is what they do. So they have the conventional means. The problem is most of America's nukes are old nukes that have been sitting there since like the mid 60s, the mid 70s. So America is sitting there thinking that, they can fight these countries, and these countries are even going to attempt to fight them with conventional weaponry. The conventional weaponry just meaning, your typical type of ground to air missiles, your typical, fighter jets going around fighting. No, these countries are not going to waste time. They're not going to do all of that. They're just going to launch on this country. And, that's just going back into Jeremiah 50 and 9. For I am raising up an army of great nations from the north. They will join forces to attack Babylon, and she will be captured. The enemy's arrows will go straight to the mark. They will not miss. Those countries are not going to try to fight America with conventional weaponry the way America is thinking that they'll do. Going back to verse 11, and I believe that was Isaiah 47 and 11, a catastrophe for once you are not prepared. America is not prepared for what's coming. They're not thinking these other countries are just going to launch on them, and that's exactly what's going to happen. Let's scroll down to 14 and 15. Yes, prepare to attack Babylon, all you surrounding nations. Let your archers shoot at her, spare no arrows, for she has sinned against Yahweh Bashem and Yahweh Shai. So the Most High Yahweh Bashem and Yahweh Shai is letting you know here what's going to happen. Spare no arrows, meaning release every last one that you have. So if I'm correct, Russia has the most amount of ICBMs in the world. Probably something like 5,200, if I'm correct. America is not too far behind, but America may only have like, let's say 4,900. So don't quote me on those exact numbers. I'm just trying to tell you that Russia has just a slight bit more of nuclear weaponry than the U.S. has, but not by much. So when you read here where it says, let your archers shoot at her, spare no arrows, for she has sinned against Yahweh Bashem and Yahweh Shai. That is letting you know that these particular countries, not just Russia, but China as well, Iran, North Korea, Great Britain, France, all of these particular countries with nukes are going to launch on this country, spare no arrows, for she has sinned against Yahweh Bashem and Yahweh Shai. Verse 15. Shout war cries against her from every side. Look, she surrenders. Her walls have fallen, It is Yahweh Bashem Yahweh Shai's vengeance. So take vengeance on her. Do to her as she has done to others. And we know that the U.S. is the only nation in the world that has actually used nuclear warfare, which was done on Japan during the Second World War II. So this place is finished. You know, the Most High's word has already gone out, and this cannot be reversed, canceled, delayed, postponed. The Most High Yahweh Bashem Yahweh Shai is not going to change his mind on this. His word never comes back void. And we can end this particular video here with that scripture, Isaiah 55 and 11. Isaiah 55 and 11 in the KJV. Salakia, so shall my word be that goeth forth out of my mouth. It shall not return unto me void, but it shall accomplish that which I please, and it shall prosper in the thing whereto I sent it. I pray this has been edifying and reaches the ears it's supposed to reach. Shalom.